guys, it's Janis. Welcome back to my channel, and today's video is going to be about how to get a first in law school. So just for a little background information, I am a second-year law student going into third year. I spent the first 2 years in UCL. So basically, I'm on a dual degree where I spent 2 years in UCL and 2 years in Hong Kong U, and I'm about to start my third year in Hong Kong U, but I already finished my UCL portion of my studies. And I'm making this video because I really wish I had this video when I was a first year at UCL, because I feel like studying law is actually a very difficult thing. It's very specific, like there are specific skills you need to learn for it. It's not just something that comes to you naturally. So this video is hopefully going to show you some ways to go about studying law easier so that you can feel less stressed out but also achieve your best grades. And also for those of you who are studying law, I've always found it very helpful to actually see essays written by people who got first. So I've also linked in the description some of my essays that got, I think, 74 to 76 marks, and I'll put them in the description so you can see what a first class essay looks like. But yeah, with all that said, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first thing I have to say is that it's very important to have a clear system of studying. I've found that things in law school tend to get really overwhelming really quickly, and for me that's usually around October or November, because that's when you have all your essays due, you have competitions mooting, and you have applications like for internships. So there's just a lot of things going on in October and November, and you don't want to start thinking about studying at that time because it's going to be very overwhelming. So I think it's very good to start at the very start of the year in September to have a clear system about how you're going to go about doing things, so that even when things get overwhelming, you have a system already and you can kind of meet all your internal deadlines. What I mean is that for each topic you study, you should probably have a system of when you should start studying it, when you should finish it and move on to the next. And because university, at least at UCL, was structured in lectures and then 2 or 3 weeks later there's one tutorial, that system was kind of the basis for my own studying system. So basically my timeline for studying was that the lectures would be the first time I ever heard of a topic. It was my introduction to the topic. But after the lecture and between that and the tutorial, those 2 or 3 weeks, I will read all of the required reading for that topic and genuinely finish all of them, because I always find it really hard to just do the reading right before exams. So I try to do it immediately after I learn the topic. So all the reading, you make your notes and so on, and then you go to the tutorial. The tutorial is meant for you to really consolidate all your learning on that topic and to ask questions. And so usually after my tutorial, I'll aim to finish my notes in 2 or 3 days so that I can actually be done with the topic, understand everything, and leave that behind and move on to the next one. At the end of the school year, when I'm studying for the exams, I already know that all the individual topics are already done and I've finished my reading, and at the end all I need to do is just memorize it and study it and understand it to a higher level. Having the system is so much easier than just studying whenever I feel like it, or not really finishing things on time and pushing them at the end, because even though it's true that there's around like 2 months right before our exams just for us to study, it seems like you can just catch up on your work during then. But I find it much easier to just finish things on time and not leave any stray ends at the end, so that at the end I can just focus on memorizing and applying the stuff I learned. The second piece of advice I have is to write notes in a way that's helpful to you. I actually made a note-taking video on this channel, so you can click the link in the description. Doing good note-taking is so important because your notes are basically what you'll be studying all the way up to your exams. You're probably not going to look at your textbook after you read it once, but your notes that you took from your textbook are always going to be here. And so those notes are very, very important, and you have to make sure you do them well. And what are good notes for everyone is really quite different because everyone learns really differently. But for example, for me, I'm a very visual person. And also at UCL, we need to memorize everything for exams because they're all closed books. So putting those two things together, when I'm making my notes, I have to make sure they're very visual so that I can actually memorize them easily rather than being line after line of words. So basically what I do is that in general, my notes or the facts of law are all linear, but when I have case law, I will put those cases in a box instead of in a linear format. And this was insanely helpful for me because when I'm studying, I don't have to think about, oh, what cases are in this topic. I can just visualize how many boxes there are on that page, and I can instantly know how many cases were in that topic. And that makes memorization so much easier for me. It also really helps me from confusing different cases or confusing the ratios of different cases because they're all in their own boxes, and I don't really know how to explain it, but it just really works for memorization. So yeah, this tip is just kind of general, but you do have to find a way that makes note-taking easy for you. Maybe that's flashcards, maybe that is a linear format, maybe it's mind maps. Just find a way that works for you and helps you memorize things without taking too much of your time. The third tip is to find a way that helps you concentrate very early on in the year so that you can concentrate when you study. It sounds really simple, but I think one of the things in law school I learned, or in university in general, is that your social life, your activities take up so much of your time that the time you have to study is usually not that much. So it's really important to maximize the efficiency of the time that you're studying and to make sure you're concentrated for the time that you're sitting at your desk and get the maximum amount of studying done so you can go out and play afterward. For me, a couple of things that really helped. First, it's having soundtrack music playing in the background. I always feel like I can't concentrate if I just hear white noise, so I'll put on a movie soundtrack, and I actually have a Spotify playlist of like 100 different soundtracks, but I'll just play it. It'll feel like a story in my head and I can concentrate and sink into the work. The other thing I found that really helps me is physically putting my phone away, because I can have all those forest apps and whatever, but I can't concentrate if I have my phone near me and I notice the possibility that something's happening. So most of the time I'll just like shove it across the room or put it in a drawer and literally act like it's not there. The other thing is that I feel like our efficiency as people will vary during the day. Some people are morning people, some people are night people. For me, I really can't study after dinner time. I just get really tired and I feel like that's the time for socializing and relaxing. Every time I try to study at night in London, I just like zoned out and I would talk to my friends and stuff. So I think it was very important for me to recognize this and to schedule all my studying in the morning and afternoons. So instead of agonizing over studying in the evening, I can just say I'm never ever going to study in the evening and just don't study in the evening. As long as the time that you do schedule for studying, such as morning and afternoon, are well spent, it's completely fine in university to just not study for periods of time and to really like make your schedule more flexible. So yeah, my third tip is just to find a way that works for you that helps you concentrate. And that brings me to my last part of this video, which is going to be a more detailed technical look at how to write essays, because I think we all know that in law school, the only way you're assessed basically is just through your essays or your problem questions. So learning how to write good essays is the key to getting a good grade in law school. And for this part of the video, I'm going to show you guys one of the essays I said I would put on the Google Drive earlier. This is an essay on equity and trust. And we're going to look at the first question on the screen there, which is an essay question, and see how we can brainstorm and structure our essay. Okay, so the first thing you should do when you receive an essay is to understand the question and make sure you really don't get it wrong, because that will append everything else you'll ever do. And so taking this question we have here, we can see that clearly the subject matter of the topic is written out in the very first line, which is it's about the rules and the validity of express trusts. And if you've studied trusts, you know that includes basically the three certainties. And what they're asking you to evaluate is whether the courts have lent too far towards upholding trusts at the expense of other important considerations. So you have a big general analytical question of have the courts lent too far, and they give you sort of a direction to go, which is to talk about, first of all, upholding trusts, and second of all, any other important considerations that the courts may have neglected. And so you can clearly see that the question is quite skeleton, and they only say things like other important considerations, but they don't tell you what those considerations are. So that's kind of the first thing you'll have to brainstorm when you get the question is, what specific important considerations are they asking us to evaluate? And here you can see I was just brainstorming some ideas such as the easy administration of trusts, consistency with other rules on the other types of fiduciary powers, also adherence to precedent and the authority of the court. And so those are the other important considerations that I've already expanded on. And the other thing I thought of when thinking about the question was that they asked whether the court had upheld trusts at the expense of other considerations, but actually doesn't upholding trusts also reflect certain important considerations? So that's how I expanded the upholding trusts part of the question too. So I have a more fuller understanding. And once we have all those thoughts in our head, we can begin brainstorming our stance on the essay, so our thesis. And my thesis for this essay was that the courts had not led too far. Firstly, because even though some other considerations are disturbed, it is quite minimal. And secondly, upholding trusts itself also reflects really important considerations. And so the courts have not gone too far going the way they did. And now, since I've had my stance, I can work on how to structure my essay. So this might only make sense to those of you who have started studying trusts, but basically, because the subject area is the rules and validity of express trusts, I can just structure my essay according to the specific rules and evaluate each rule separately and see whether the court has gone too far in each specific rule. Now we can look at the left side of the screen, which is where I have my actual finished essay, to see how I structure it. And so the first big category is the first rule, which is certainty of subject matter. And within that, I split it into a few other subparagraphs. The first one is just the law, which is me explaining the current law. This is merely descriptive, so it's a very short paragraph. And the second subparagraph is other considerations. And I talk about how the law has tended to uphold trust rather than those other considerations. And this part is also quite explanatory or descriptive, so it's rather short. And finally, I will come to the analytical part of the essay where I evaluate that actually the law doesn't really upend those other considerations. And this is where I will argue, use logic, legal analysis, and so on. And so this part should be the chunkiest part of my essay because that's where all of my personal thoughts come in. And so that is basically the structure of the first bit, which is rule 1. And then I'll basically do the exact same thing for rule 2, evaluate it in the same kind of way, and try to answer my thesis. Finally, in my section C, I talk about a very general point, which is that, in fact, upholding trusts is very important because it reflects a lot of important considerations, such as respecting the settlor's intentions. And this is a paragraph by itself because this point actually relates back to both Rule 1 and Rule 2. So it's a very general point, and I put it at the end because it kind of sums up my sentiments on the topic. And this is also quite a big paragraph because it is very analytical, and this is where the markers will give me marks based on my legal analysis. And so after all that, I just have a short conclusion and I'm done. And that's the end of my video. So I hope you guys really enjoyed it and learned a few useful things, and please let me know if you want to see more specific videos on each of these topics, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye!